All right, good day everyone. Today we are going to look at your formative assessment 2 for experiential learning. We're just going to take a quick look over the brief and then just go a little over the explanation and the technical side of the assignment. Okay, so obviously you'll submit it online and it is due between the 21st to 27th of May. All your submissions will be done on the Cole campus. Okay, so let's dive in. So we're first going to look at question 1. So question 1 says, use the two YouTube video clips and the infographic provided as a reference point to evaluate and critically reflect on your personal 21st century skills, namely critical thinking, communication, citizenship, creativity, growth mindset, and collaboration. Provide your answer in the table format indicated below and be sure to provide a motivation for evaluation of each of the 21st century skills, as well as a solution to improve each skill, develop it even further. Okay, so this is very similar to your guys' first assignment. Obviously for this one, they've given you exactly what it is that you need to look at, discuss it, and then create a plan of this. For this, I would highly suggest that you implement the SMART table just to ensure that you cover all areas of the question. The table is slightly different. There's an example on the next slide, which I'll go to. But just as an activity suggestion, I would suggest using the SMART table. Okay, guys, please note, absolutely no bullet points for this assignment. If I see any bullet points, unfortunately, we won't be able to mark them because this is reflection. Bullet points won't be accepted. Okay, so, all right, so here's the example. As you can see, it has evaluation, motivation, and then solution/development ideas. So it is mainly here we will implement that SMART table. Obviously, you won't need to do the table within the table. It's just a way to ensure that you cover all bases. And then obviously there are the multiple 21st century skills that you'll need to discuss, evaluate, motivate, and then give a solution/development ideas for it. And this question is worth 24 marks, I believe. Okay, so not too much, but please ensure that you give us enough so that we can grant you each mark. All right, and now moving into question 2. This is obviously the question where most of you will have some difficulties. So question 2 is, develop a project proposal for Boston Media House, South Africa, on how it can become an agent for positive change in South Africa through addressing any social or environmental issue of your choice on a large scale. Okay, there's obviously an inspiration video that I would highly suggest you guys watch. It's for the Adidas recycled shoes. Very interesting. Not too much information, but gets its point across quite well. Okay, so you can then look at that and then see how they've applied it on a larger scale. Okay, so getting into the more technical side of the question is step 1, which is decide on a social or environmental issue. What do you feel passionate about? What issues are close to your heart? And where would you like to make a change or have an impact? The reason that these questions are included is because it tends to be easier to do an assignment on something that you yourself are passionate about or interested in and things like that. And then obviously you'll be more creative with ideas and procedures and things like that. Okay. So below are a few ideas to stimulate your thinking, but you are not limited to the list and are free to choose any social or environmental issue. Okay, so just quickly looking at a few of them. Here we have gender-based violence, teen pregnancies, abandoned babies, drug-related issues, gang violence, rhino poaching, plastic waste, and overflowing landfills. If you go through all of them, you'll see that they are extremely relatable to South Africa. So this is really a good list to go through if you're a little bit uncertain about having any passion projects or anything like that, because they are very relatable to South Africa as a whole. Okay. And then moving into step 2 is become acquainted with the appreciative inquiry method. Appreciative inquiry is a change-based model that focuses on positives, things that already work, and resources that one already has access to. When developing your project proposal, you should use this model and continually think about the resources Boston Media House South Africa already has at their disposal. Okay, so here it says physical locations across South Africa, a large number of employees and students, time, impact, etc. Okay, so the reason that they include this is because when you're doing this project proposal, you need to think about what resources it is that you have at your campus. I can say that it's safe to assume that all the resources that you have at your campus, such as the library with the computer center, students, the amount of staff that they have, a hall, etc., physical facilities and things like that, it can be safely assumed that that is at all Boston Media House campuses across the country. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're doing this proposal, because that is a huge foot in the door, because you don't necessarily need to request resources, you already have them. Okay, and these resources are spread out through South Africa. So if you can apply something at your campus, I can guarantee you that it can definitely be applied at all the other campuses, and in the exact same manner, because it will have the same facilities, etc. So these resources are what you should use in developing solutions and suggestions as to how Boston can address the chosen issue or provide relief to a certain extent. Okay, so again, safe to assume that all the resources and everything that you have at your campus, you can have at all the other campuses, and we encourage you to make use of that. Okay, you're not allowed to propose that you apply for funding for this project from the South African government or any other institution. You are only allowed to use and draw on resources that Boston Media House already has available. Okay, so this can't be a proposal for grants or anything like that, or to personal investors, private investors, because we want you to make use of resources that are already there. So majority of NGOs, obviously, once they're established, they can start requesting funding and things like that, because their solutions, etc., already implemented and they have results to show for it. So you're a first timer, obviously, within the case of this proposal, and asking to implement something. So take it as this is the first time that you'll be running something like this, and it's the first time that your NGO will be requesting for this. Okay, so applying for funding wouldn't be realistic, even in real life application, because you're starting out. So that would only usually be done once you're already an established NGO or non-profit organization, non-governmental organization, etc. Okay. Then over here it says, watch this YouTube clip a few times to learn about the appreciative inquiry and the 5 Ds. Okay, so the 5 Ds are define, discover, dream, design, and deliver. That should form part of your project proposal. Okay, so with these 5 Ds, you can be creative with them, or you can be very blunt with it, in that you list define, and then you define, and then discover, you discover, explain how you discovered, etc., etc. Or once you're doing just your general proposal, you can just throw it in, and if something applies to defining, then you can then say in brackets define. So over here it says the 5 Ds mentioned in the video should form an integral part of your project proposal. You have the freedom to choose how and when it is incorporated. The 5 Ds, be creative. Either as the main structure of the content section of your project, so as I said, quite blatantly written out, or it can be indicated in brackets where certain sections align with specific Ds, for example. Okay, so again, you can do it quite blatant structure, give them headings, subheadings, etc., or you can just throw them in with your research. All right, step 3. So these are obviously just the steps for question 2, just to remind you guys. So they are nicely laid out, should give you a good idea of how to go about this. Okay, so step 3 is conduct research on the social environmental issue you've decided on. Ensure that you have a minimum of 3 recent academic resources which are no older than 2018, so meaning they were published after 2018 or within 2018. That provides current data on specific issue in South Africa. Start brainstorming how Boston Media House can be part of the solution in addressing this issue. Okay, so obviously there's then a minimum requirement of at least 3 academic resources that are no older than 2018. I would highly suggest you have at least 6. They don't not all 6 need to be recent, only 3 of them. But the reason I say that is because if you're only referencing 3 sources, I don't think that you've researched enough or covered the content enough. Okay, so what I suggest to my students with regards to referencing and things like that, if you find an article, whether it's relevant or not, recent or not. If you find an article that you really enjoy and that really applies to what it is that you want to do and is very informative, I highly suggest going to their reference list, obviously at the end of each journal publication or book or chapter within books, etc., etc. There's a list of references. Go and look at their list of references. It'll also help you find things that are recent. If you find a paper that, let's say, was published last year, maybe they've got recent papers that they've referenced that are not older than 2018, and that will then obviously relate directly to your issue. Okay, so that's a good way of going about it, to finding relevant and recent resources and references. Okay, so that's what I would highly suggest. Always look at the paper that you really enjoyed, that's very informative. Always look at their reference list and see if there's anything in their reference list. Obviously, you'll need to go and read a few of them and see if you can apply that to yourself. Okay, so again, you need a minimum of 3 that are recent academic sources, but I would highly suggest having a minimum of 6 overall, 3 being recent and 3 can be older or more recent, etc. Okay. Then moving into step 4. Step 4 is construct your project proposal. First, plan your entire proposal similar to what is illustrated on page 293 in your textbook. I highly suggest going and looking at this. Very good example. Very easy once you've seen it, and that'll be the first thing that you'll do for your assignment, obviously, after you've chosen the social or environmental issue that you decided to go after. Okay, and then proceed to construct the document. Below is a breakdown of what the most important aspects that should be covered and included in your proposal. Remember, you have the freedom to decide on a structure for your proposal. The reason you have a freedom to decide on the structure of your proposal is because there's not necessarily an academic set out layout for proposals, because each proposal differs from one another. So some will have more areas, etc. But the one provided is truly what I like to call the skeleton of the frame. Okay, it is the skeleton of your assignment, and you need to ensure that all the areas that are covered in the skeleton are included in your assignment. If you want to add more, you definitely have the freedom to do that, and it's frankly encouraged, just to show that you have a better understanding of the assignment, to ensure that the people who are reading it can really grasp what it is that you're doing. Okay, and then as long as the end result is cohesive and coherent document that follows a sensible manner. Okay, so please ensure that when you're doing this, obviously we're going to give you the basic structure quickly. Just ensure that everything is done logically and laid out in a way that it makes sense. Okay. Okay. So obviously in my slides, I haven't included the mark breakdown for each section. You guys can go to your brief for the mark breakdown and see, obviously where there's more marks, where there's less marks, and what is expected of you. Obviously, the more marks there are, the more there's expected of you. Okay. So we're quickly going to go over the basic structure of a proposal. So your front page will then include your name, to whom it's for, maybe the name of the organization, etc., etc. A lot of project proposals tend to have a small paragraph on their front page just to say, thank you for reading over my proposal, etc., etc. And it's like a little bit of a breakdown, but not too much. Okay. Then you'll have your table of contents. The table of contents can either come before or after your project summary, which is your abstract, but ideally rather put it before, just so that people can get a better idea of what it is your assignment is about. Obviously, this is for real life application, so we'll address it as such. For real life application, ideally people prefer to see the abstract beforehand, okay, before they decide we want to go further in. Alright, but also you can put it after. There's no wrong way of doing it. It is just obviously a personal suggestion on my end, and also just to practice the real life application of it. Okay, so you'll have your table of contents, and then for this structure, it shows that you'll then have your abstract. Okay, so this will be the last item that is completed on your assignment. The reason that I emphasize that is because your abstracts will include parts of your conclusion or your recommendations, etc., which is something that will be done dead last of your assignment, because you're unable to discuss findings and things like that without actually conducting the research. Okay, so obviously you can draft an abstract. I would highly suggest going and just researching how to write an abstract. It'll tell you what is important, what isn't, for an abstract, for example, just a few points. You need to include the methodology that you've used. You need to include how it is that you've gathered information. Have you done interviews, surveys, etc.? Your participants, let's say you did surveys. How many people did you survey? Things like that. What area is this going to be initially conducted in, etc.? Okay, so I'd highly suggest just going and Googling how to write an academic abstract, and then we'll give you a few bullet points on what you need to include and just guide you a little bit better. Okay, but again, I highly suggest you do this dead last. So this will be the last thing that you do. Okay, then moving into your content, which will be your research, etc. So you need to define the problem identification and description of the social or environmental issue with reference to recent data and statistics. Okay, so that's quite clear. So here's 1D, just in case anyone was, had forgotten about the 5 Ds that you need to implement. You can see that we've actually implemented a lot of them for you just to guide you a little bit. Okay. Then the next one will be the D of discover. This is explicit and detailed resources to be used to address the issue at hand. Okay. So these resources will be such things as the library, the computer center, the hall maybe just the general grounds, etc., etc. Okay, those need to be discussed in detail, how it is that they're going to be used, etc., and so forth. Then we're going to dream. So dream is basically desired end goal, which is your objectives. So project goals and objectives. You need to talk about what it is that you are looking to achieve here. What is the dream of this project? What is the dream of this proposal? Okay, very self-explanatory. And then you move into design, which is explicit and detailed action steps needed to achieve project goals and address the issue. Timelines, methodologies, deliverables, etc. Okay. Again, this needs to be very detailed, especially with regards to your timelines and your methodologies. These are 2 very important things that you need to focus on during this design of it. Okay, obviously your deliverables are also very important. Okay, and then moving on to destiny. This is the implementation and execution plan. This needs to be explained. This needs to include a visual illustration. Okay, excuse me for that. So your visual illustration, an example of that is on page 300 in your textbook. Again, I highly suggest going to look at that, give you a good example, and then you won't feel too lost with that. All right, and then moving on from your content is then your visual illustration of the implementation plan. Okay, so over here you've discussed your implementation plan, etc., etc., and then here you need to include it as a layout diagram, etc., etc. Okay, and then here's your annexures. So your annexures, you can have multiple, you can have one, depending on what information you have. So if you did interviews, you need to then transcribe all your interviews and include them in your annexures. If you did surveys, you need to include a sample of your survey, etc., etc. So just little things like that. So the project proposal plan also needs to be included in your annexures. Okay, and that is again found on page 293 in the textbook. Okay. So as I said, you can have multiple annexures. So annexure A is obviously designated for your project proposal plan, and then you can have annexure B for your survey example, etc., etc. Okay, and then don't forget your list of references. Okay, that is also still very important. As per usual, that will be included after your conclusion and your content, etc. Okay, so it won't fall behind your annexures, it'll actually come before your annexures. All right. Okay. Then here's some more technical aspects of your project proposal. You have included a few of the marks. Okay, so please ensure that you cite all your references. This is vitally important. If you are directly quoting something, please ensure to use quotation marks. Okay, that if you don't use quotation marks, even though it will be a mistake, it will then be seen as plagiarism. All right, so to avoid plagiarism, you need to ensure that your referencing is impeccable. You guys use Harvard referencing method, which is very straightforward. There are obviously websites. My personal favorite is called Cite This For Me. So it is spelled C-I-T-E and then F-O-R for me. Okay. type that into Google, comes up, and then you just choose which referencing it is that you want. Very easy to use, and it's for free. It'll also save your bibliography for you for about a week max. And then also you can copy and paste it, and it gives you in-text referencing and obviously the referencing that you need to include in your reference. Okay, so your referencing needs to be vitally important. And guys, remember, if you've read an article, just because you aren't directly quoting it, you are still sourcing that information from an external source. You did not have that source beforehand. So if you are discussing anything that you read about, in past or anything like that, you need to ensure that you reference it, okay? Even let's say, for example, this could be quite a silly example, if you recall a stat, and let's say that stat is correct, you cannot just give it to us and say that is the statistic and it's true. So you need to ensure that you then find an article, a government website, an organizational website, etc., that will give that exact information and then reference it, okay? That's very, very important, all right? Because we are obviously all sourcing information that we have from external sources. We need to make sure that we give credit and we reference, all right? So, professional presentation and formatting, following all evidence requirements, including type, signed, and date plagiarism declaration. Okay, that's very basic. And then use good formal language. Make sure you look at your spelling, your grammar, the structure, the logic of your sentences, etc. Please avoid run-on sentences. Rather break that long sentence down into two or more sentences, just to convey your message better, also to ensure that it's grammatically correct. Ensure that when you're using certain words, that it is the correct form of that word. So, let's say you're doing a self-reflection, for example, and you want to say that you're introverted. You won't say I'm introvert. Okay, you will say I am introverted. Okay, and then also part of academic writing is you do not say it's, you say it is. You do not use any shortenings of any words and things like that. Rather type out the two words that usually come together, like haven't, say have not. Okay, that is what academic writing is. So please focus on your spelling, your grammar, the word use that you use, your run-on sentences, etc. Okay, so for question 2, it is 61 marks. Obviously, you can see this is the bulk of your assignment. And that is also why the question was so detailed. Okay. Then moving on to question 3. Design an infographic using Canva. This is obviously a free website. You guys can just follow this link. That summarizes your proposed project in question 2. This infographic can be used as a supplementary material to your project proposal document that provides a quick and effective overview of your project. Okay, again, so you can include that in your annexures, along with everything else that I'd listed previously, and how overview of your project and how Boston Media House can have a large-scale impact and be an agent for positive change in South Africa. Okay, so there is an example on your brief that I would highly suggest you go and look at. Very nice little example about recycling, super useful. Okay. So just a point on the previous question. I have had a few questions about using Canva for the proposal. Obviously, I'm not too familiar with all of the functions of that website, but if it does have some sort of a proposal layout or anything like that, you guys are welcome to use it to assist you, as long as you ensure that you have everything that we have required of you. Okay, so as long as it has everything that's in your brief, you are more than welcome to use that to aid you. Okay. And then your infographic should adhere to the following requirements. Okay, contains all key aspects addressed in the proposal documents. That is worth 5 marks. Then visual and creative appeal. I have no doubt that you guys will truly hit this out the park. I'm sure it'll be very eye-catching and innovative. Okay, and then obviously again with regards to that, so this is not as strict as your academic writing for your proposal. You don't have to use it is, have not. You can use it's, has, haven't, etc. Okay, but still please focus on your language, your spelling, your grammar, structure, logic, and make sure that it's visible and legible. Okay, we need to be able to read it without any difficulty. All right. Okay, so quick mark breakdown. Question 1 is worth 24 marks. Question 2 is worth 61 marks. And then question 3 is worth 15 marks. And that'll come up to a total of 100 marks for your assignments. Okay, just a quick word of advice. Please ensure that you start your assignment as soon as possible. As you guys can see, even though it won't necessarily be the longest assignment, granted 61 marks is extremely long and 100 marks overall is very long. The reason being is because you need to sort through a lot of information, you need to source things, etc. And that can take quite a lot of time. Okay. And then you need to consult with your lecturer to ensure that you're on the right track. Guys, please make use of your lecturers. We're there to help you. Please ensure that you consult with us. Send us an email, send us a WhatsApp. If it's something that is going to require multiple follow-up questions, rather come see us during office hours or request that you can set up a meeting with us, an appointment or anything like that. Please consult with your lecturer. Okay. And then, if you find a good article or research paper, make use of their reference list to find more relevant information. Okay, so I did discuss that earlier, but just to re-emphasize, it's a very good way of finding information. Okay. Obviously, you need a minimum of 3 recent references, but here I say have more than 3 references, because 3 recent references, I still personally wouldn't necessarily cover all the information. Okay, so you guys do have a minimum of 3 recent ones, but there's no maximum amount to how many references you have. Okay, make use of different sources and things like that. Make use of older studies and whatnot. The older studies will also give you an idea of other proposals that may or may not have been implemented, which worked, which didn't, how we've progressed over the years with dealing with the specific issue, things like that. You can also talk about, increased resources over the last 2 decades, let's say for women who are victims of intimate partner violence. We can talk about how the rate of it has increased, but also the fact that access to resources and things like that has also increased, and look at things like that. Okay, so anything that's published 2018, granted that's 5 years, but if you're looking at long-term solutions, you also need to look at long-term research proposals, things that were implemented years ago. How are they doing? Are they successful, etc., etc. Okay, and build on that. All right. So please do not use .com sources for the references, as they are not viewed as academically reliable. Okay, so .com. A little thing that I like to say is, if you're going to use a website, please ensure that it has .org behind it, for organizations such as NGOs, government stats, and things like that. That is usually a better way of going about it. Okay. .com resources, things like Wikipedia or anything.com, not necessarily reliable. Okay, and that is it for today, guys. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to your lecturers, and so that we can assist you. Please start as soon as possible to ensure that you guys don't have any last minute obstacles. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.